Hey guys, are you interviewing for college soon or a scholarship maybe and wondering how to ace your college interviews? If so, welcome to part 2 of our 2-part series on how to ace your college interview. In this video, we're going to be focusing on college interviews that are official interviews. What I mean by that is they're not alumni interviews. They're interviews with people like deans, with maybe committees that make important decisions about your admission, or possibly interviews with Congress people or other kind of official folks that are going to weigh in on your college acceptance or scholarship eligibility. If you're doing an alumni interview, I recommend that you check out our other video on interviews, which is focused on alumni interviews. So go check that out, part 1 in the series. Before I get too deep into this video though, I want to remind everybody, subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already and you're on this college journey. We have lots of tips for test prep, for college admissions, and everything in between. The other thing that I'll say is we have full-scale prep courses for the SAT and the ACT at SupertutorTV.com. If you haven't checked them out, head over to SupertutorTV.com. We'd love to help you prep and subscribe to our mailing list, SupertutorTV.com/subscribe. And we will tell you when we have new awesome videos, new products, anything fun going on with SuperTutor TV. We'll let you in to the know with our newsletter. So let's talk official interviews. Lots of pieces of advice. Okay, tip number 1, turn off your cell phone and do not text ever. I think that's pretty straightforward. This is a professional, official interview, right? Don't bring the cell phone out. Just don't do it. Okay, that was easy. Number 2, dress nicely. When you go for an official interview, if you're a guy and you have a suit and it fits and it looks good, I recommend wearing it. If you don't have a suit, usually it's okay to wear a button-up shirt and a pair of nice slacks. If you're a female, you can wear something that's nice and professional looking to the best of your ability. But if you're not sure, you can always ask the office that is setting up your appointment. Unlike unofficial interviews in which you're just dialoguing with the random alum who is going to be interviewing you, with official interviews, you're usually interfacing with some sort of office about your interview, and either they might distribute what kind of a dress code that you should have, or you can ask them that question, do I need to wear a suit? If you don't have a suit and you don't want to go out and spend hundreds of dollars, I get it. So you can use that to your advantage, okay? So dress nicely. This is not the time to schlub it. Don't wear jeans. You're not hanging out at a coffee house. Good. Next up, bring a resume or copy of your application. Now, this is just a general rule of thumb. I'm sure there are some places that don't care and you don't need to bring it, but I always think it's a good idea to come prepared with a copy of your file. It helps the interviewer out. It makes them feel like you prepared for this and you showed up and you have a little bit to help them out. Cool? Cool. Okay. Next, practice all those dopey interview questions. So if you're going to have an official interview, I recommend that you practice, especially all those very typical interview questions. What are those? Okay, I'm going to go through them really fast. If you want them slower, you know where the speed button is. Little gear below me. Tell me about yourself. What do you do when you're not in class? What is your top major of choice? If you could meet anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why? All of these kinds of questions, you can find lists of them all over the internet. Make sure you have a decent answer for all of them. What's great too is if you go through a process in which you prepare for your interview and you practice what you're going to say in response to lots of different questions, then no matter what question comes to you, you probably can improvise and use some of the things that you came up with, even if it's not the same question, which is great. It means you're going to be developing out your stories, you're going to be developing out your ideas. Next up, I also say try to figure out the specific interview questions that your particular program might be asking. Research the specific program that you're interviewing for. Google it and see if anybody has commented or posted actual interview questions for the particular program that you're applying to, because there might be a list of questions that are very typical that are listed online. This is especially true if you're going to a service academy. I think they often ask you, are you comfortable dying in combat? And crazy questions like that. So if you are going to apply to a very official program that other people have gone to in the past, chances are somebody somewhere has posted some of those questions online. And if so, go find them and practice those. Cool. Okay, number 6, have something to talk about. The other thing that I generally say is, in addition to practicing and in addition to knowing kind of the kind of questions that you're probably going to encounter, it's really important to have something to talk about. And what I mean by that is walk in the door having just read or watched, or better yet, both, something intellectually stimulating, interesting, and not too controversial that you could randomly bring up in conversation and sound really smart and intelligent. Some ideas of what I mean by this: you could listen to a TED Talk, you could listen to a podcast, you could watch a PBS documentary on particle physics or the melting polar ice caps. Read a book. What kind of a book? Well, I like to say my favorites are like nonfiction, because I think it's kind of impressive when you get like a teenager who's reading like nonfiction. I would say anything like New York Times bestseller list, that's always good too. But generally I steer away from the novels and try to do things that are like nonfiction, because that's like kind of unexpected sometimes from a teenager. So there's like a piece of advice. One question I know I've heard before at interviews is, could you tell me about something interesting that you've recently read? And if you have nothing to say, or if all you have is Catcher in the Rye because my English teacher made me read it, not the best answer in the world. So make sure that you have something to talk about. And even if you don't bring it up in terms of a question like that, it gives you something just random to bring up or talk about, or another random source of ideas that makes you sound like an intellectual. So it's always a good thing to do before you go in for that interview. Next, know your weaknesses and get ready to spin. I know this is an idea that I've talked about in some of my videos that are basically on college admissions essays, but this is really important in your interview. When you're doing an official interview, it's different from an alumni interview, because at a lot of alumni interviews, the alumni don't have any idea what your file looked like. But with an official interview, they've seen it all. They have seen the paper version of you. They liked you well enough to invite you in for an interview, and they're trying to shake out whether you're more awesome than you were on paper, or the same, or not quite as awesome. And this is where you have to be on target. And the best way to do that is to know on paper, what are those weaknesses that you have? Can you be aware of your weaknesses? And then can you spin a narrative as you talk to these people with an awareness of what they're judging you on potentially, to help them see the world from your perspective, or see how awesome you might actually be. I had one student, case in point, who I think he had something like 5 to 8 B's and B pluses on his transcript. And we knew what his weakness was when he was applying to colleges. He had an awesome test score. He had pretty good activities. I mean, some leadership, some sports. We knew his weakness. His weakness was the B's, right? And so what we did when we practiced for his interview, which he had with the top 10 university, he had an interview with the dean, and like 2 days after his interview with the dean, he got into the college. But before he flew out, we practiced his interview. And we focused on how to spin the conversation away from that weakness, right? How do we spin you as an attractive candidate? And what we tried to focus on was his sort of uniqueness as an academic, that he's not like everybody else, right? That he's socially intelligent, right? He basically, if you looked at sort of his activities and things, you could see that like he had been a leader among people who were like decades older than him, right? He had led adults in activities and things like that. And that was kind of impressive, because to be able to walk in and like have the confidence, but also the humility to lead groups of adults, like that's kind of cool from a kid, right? And then also being able to get along with people, being able to be social, being able to get nominated for things and elected things in student government or whatever it is. So these are the kind of things that we talked about, and that we talked about spinning. And then the other way that we spinned it was the idea that like he had one particular area, which was his area of interest, in which all of his grades were awesome. And so that was the other side of the narrative, is that all of his grades were awesome, and everything that wasn't these 2 subjects where he got the worst grades and the subjects where he got the worst grades, there was also an upward trend. And he also had an essay in his set that kind of talked through when he had this epiphany that like, wow, this is why these matters. It's not just about, memorizing facts, but it's about ideas and etc. In any case, it worked. So you have to know that whenever you're in an interview, in an official interview, you have all the power of persuasion behind you. It is, you face to face with another human being. And one of the most compelling things that you have to offer another human being is your story. Remember, narrative and story is so powerful. So however you can spin whatever's happened in your life, however you can spin your weaknesses with your own story, with what matters to you and why, that's how you're going to be able to convince somebody else sitting across the desk from you that you deserve a shot. Next, which is a related idea, is make sure you know what your strengths are and that you are able to play to those or emphasize them. In particular, one kind of story that I really like students to tell when they get this interview opportunity is anything that's kind of impressive on your resume that doesn't speak for itself. For example, I've had students in the past do like research seminars, and the research seminars that they do, they're outside of school, and they're these really cool opportunities where they're doing hardcore, like collegiate level research. But you would never know that that's what that club meant when you look at it on their activities docket. If you have any activities like that on your activities roll that some other people might not understand, or that's some sort of club that's very unique to your region or area, or that isn't just, football or varsity swimming, that might not translate as well. You're the interpreter here, and you get to talk about how incredible this particular experience was, or what your contribution was, and why it's so awesome. Also, know what on your application didn't speak as a strength, even if it was a strength, right? What maybe didn't transfer on paper, but you could really give a voice to if you're here in 3 dimensions with these people. And finally, remember that this is a conversation. I think one of the biggest mistakes that students make in interviews is that they get really nervous, they get really uptight, and then they have these rehearsed answers that are almost like canned note cards. And when someone asks them to tell them about themselves, they memorize something. My name is so-and-so. I grew up in da-da-da-da-da. And it sounds like you're reading from some script in your head, and it's really awkward. You want to keep the awkwardness at bay. That means you want to be yourself. You want to try to connect with the person across from the desk. You want to try to relax as much as you can. What interviewers want to see is a real human being. They want a real human being who lives, who breathes, who has ideas, who's passionate, who's interesting, who's compassionate, who listens. It's just as important when you ask a question of the interviewer, or when they're talking to you about their school, that you care and you listen and you make a little bit of eye contact, but not creepy eye contact, that you have a conversation, that you show some social adeptness, and that you're able to hang with even like some older person who's interviewing you. That speaks volumes about you and what you're capable of. And you want to come off as an awesome, genuine, cool human being. And I think that starts with the idea that this is a conversation. It's not a formal presentation necessarily. And if you can remember that, even if this is some official dean who has the power to let you in or give you a scholarship, I think you guys will fare well. And actually, I almost forgot. I have one more tip, and that is say thank you. Whether you send an email or whether you do a handwritten note, it's really important after your official interview that you officially say thank you. You just do that. It'll be good, trust me. That's it for this video. Good luck to you guys. You can do this. You've got this. Make sure you go in prepared. And good luck with those interviews. I'll see you guys next time on SupertutorTV. Subscribe to our channel, follow us. We're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, and all those fun internet places. So I'll see you there, or I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.